So, welcome to No Appointment Necessary. Today we have Joe Turner, someone I've known for a long time. I think probably 4 or 5 years now. And I'll get Joe to introduce herself. But one thing I find really interesting about Joe is that there are many, many experts in the industry. Um, and about 99% of them talk about growth and making more money and success and building your clinic. And I think Joe is possibly the only person that doesn't do that, that does something that actually I think is just as valuable. So talk to us, Joe. What do you do? Who are you? Give us a bit of background.
Hi, thanks for inviting me on the podcast, Michael. I'm Joe Turner. I appreciate some of you may have heard this story before, so I will make it succinct. But I'm a physiotherapist of 30 years now. It's 30 years this year. Makes it easier to remember. I own a couple of clinics in Gloucestershire and in Wiltshire. And just before COVID, which was significant in its timing, I trained as a life coach. Sort of that marked the end of a little bit of a wilderness journey for me. I'd been a physio of 25 years then and was just, I think I was seeking something non-clinical to invest in myself. Not knowing what I was going to do with this coaching qualification, COVID hit. Of course, during that time, there were numerous clinicians and needing support. And actually, my practice clients when I was training were all doctors or physios. And you're always being told when you're training you've got a niche, and nobody knows what they want to niche in and gets really worried about it. Mine was just blindingly obvious. Here was a world that I still loved the people in it, really wanted to support people at the time during COVID, found that they really appreciated that I knew their world. They didn't have to explain to me what it was like to work in healthcare, particularly during COVID times. And so there was this lovely marriage of my past life as a clinician and continuing life as a clinician, but this kind of new hat, if you like, of coach. Um, the other thing I realized was that I'd always pretty much had a coaching style, both as a physio and as a clinic owner, trying to support the people that worked for me. So at that point, I formed Mehab, which is essentially a coaching organization. I provide one-to-one coaching and sometimes group coaching and courses. But the premise behind Mehab is that it's trying to support the well-being of clinicians. And yeah, it's interesting observation you make there, Michael, because I knew in my gut that I was never going to be someone who particularly wanted to be up there talking about business metrics and KPIs. I don't know why. I just knew in my heart that wasn't me. Um, and I suppose as I would try and coach other people, I knew that for whatever reason, I was pretty good at helping people feel safe to a point where I could then challenge them a little bit from the edges of their comfort zone. And in my experience, um, the metrics often improve anyway as a byproduct, but it's the stuff we often don't get asked questions about that unlocks something which then allows us to do the stuff which ultimately will improve your data and your metrics. But I suppose it wasn't a particularly calculated decision. I just followed my gut and the things that I knew that I was interested in and good at, and that's how I ended up in this field.
Well, it's interesting because I think money, good metrics, all of those things we all know don't necessarily make you happy. They may make your business a little bit easier to run, but it doesn't mean that it makes you a happy business owner. And I think people miss that. I think everybody I speak to believes if only my clinic had a bit more money, if only
Mm.
I spent a little bit more time out of the clinic, my life would be perfect. And I know the people that have done that, and their life still isn't perfect. Um, so I think that's an interesting kind of thing to point out. I wonder whether one of the reasons you went into it was because of your experience as a clinic owner and knowing what you struggled with, which wasn't necessarily, again, metrics and all of that stuff. It was the emotion of it, the way it made you feel and so on.
Yeah, yeah, and this was pre-COVID. Um, Part of it was, for want of a better word, clinical fatigue. So I had been a clinician for 25 years. Um, and in my head, there was this phrase, I reckon I've got another 20 years left. Do I want the next 20 years to look and feel exactly the same as the last. So bit of fatigue, bit of boredom, if I'm honest, of working in the same way for that period of time. I'm someone that likes novelty, um, and yeah, as a clinic owner, uh, I wasn't exhausted by that or overwhelmed by that, but I am constantly someone who's looking for things to be better.
Yeah.
And I think there was a bit of frustration that, um, I'd been working in this profession, this industry for 25 years, and it still felt very similar. The frustration still felt quite similar. A lot of the practices that were, perhaps a bit outdated still felt like they were being challenged but not changing. I don't know where I'm going with this answer, but I suppose I was generally fatigued,
Yeah.
and I didn't feel like I could just keep doing things the same way and
Yeah.
see change.
And I think lots of people, we see that. We've discussed this before with people leaving the industry, people wanting to get out. I don't think that's that uncommon. Um, so I'll make an admission. You know, I think people know me as a pretty hard nosed bastard who's maybe not emotionless, but I'm the sort of person that 6, 7 years ago would have laughed at life coaching. It just sounds a bit bullshitty, to be honest.
Mm.
All life coaching people need. It just sounds like the sort of thing silly, weak people do. And uh, it's interesting that last week I sent out a newsletter which you read, and one of the things that I did in that newsletter was to point out, because I have changed my mind by the way, was to point out that being a clinic owner is, I think, one of the hardest things you can be. It's one of the hardest jobs to go into, and some of those reasons are very simple. You are fighting against a free NHS. You're trying to make a commercial business. You're fighting against a free NHS. You're fighting against a horrible private healthcare system which isn't paying you enough, which automatically brings down prices and makes life quite difficult. There's very little commercial training. You don't have the margins like a really business like ours or other businesses. You can say, "Oh, let's just hire 3 or 4 people and take a bit of the stress out." You can't do that in this industry until you really scale to the top level, and often that involves a lot of money. And I think there's so many pressures and stresses in this industry, and I see it every single day. And I mentioned to you that a lot of my time is not spent talking about metrics and KPIs and pushing people into business strategies. It's actually talking to people about the fact that they're not alone. They're not the only person experiencing the stress and the struggles that they have. And I've said it just before, but it's true. I do more cuddles and counseling than I do business advice, because much of it is people just wanting to know that they're not the only ones that are struggling. They're not the only ones who aren't making lots of money. I think there's this belief that there's all these other clinic owners and they're really rich and they're millionaires, and the fact is that isn't the case. There are very few clinics that are running in that kind of way. And so over the last few years, I've kind of changed my mind massively on all of this, because I think it's absolutely needed, particularly given the evidence that I see. I think support, and quite honestly, it's very much like patients. A lot of what you do is about education and making people feel better and reassurance, rather than purely I'm going to press you and make you better.
Absolutely. How funny that we all regress back to humanity, even Michael Schumacher. I loved that newsletter and I loved that section in your newsletter. As I was reading it, I felt my own nervous system calm down and regulate. And I love the fact that I know lots of other, not just business owners, lots of clinicians in general reading that. Well, if you haven't read it, go and read it or read it again and notice what happens as you read it, as you get that subtext of this is tough. That's why it feels tough. You're normal. You're okay. Of course, you're struggling. Who wouldn't be in this situation? It's almost it's a process of encouraging you to accept. It's accepting that yes, this is hard, and I think it's accepting that you can't polish it and make it perfect. However much you want to, however much your internal programming has told you from, I don't know, when you were brilliant at school that you're different. You can just work harder, just try harder. If it's not perfect yet, it's because you haven't worked harder. It it's we're just talking about a paragraph in a newsletter, and maybe I'm taking this too far, but it's a process of going, yes, I accept that I work in an industry that is challenging. And more crucially, I accept that I'm a human being who on many days is brilliant and on most days is perfectly human and flawed, and I can be okay with that. Um,
But
I mentioned,
Joe,
yeah,
I think this happens in all areas of life. So we think back to, for those of us old enough, the '90s, where magazines were covered with pictures of Cindy Crawford and Kate Moss, and it just made everyone feel crap because they didn't look like that. And
mm,
now it's actually turned the other way. It's now men that are being, you've got to have washboard abs and so on. And it's interesting because when you realize that those are sort of outliers, right? That most people are a little bit fat or plumper. Most people don't have X, Y, Z. I see now. I call this money dysmorphia. I think there's a huge money dysmorphia amongst the young now.
mm,
They believe Instagram and TikTok, and they believe that all of these girls are earning millions of pounds. And actually, the average wage is incredibly low for most people. It's not.
mm, mm,
I think it was something on HMRC and said there are only something like 17,000 people in the whole country that earn more than £250,000.
mm,
And I think if you ask the youth, they'd think that was about 5 million or something. And so the reason for that newsletter, or that section of the newsletter, was exactly that. It was to make people realize that they're not the only ones experiencing it, that
mm,
everybody does, even some of the people that have incredibly decent clinics. And another part of that newsletter that I always do is a market update, which is, this is what's happening in the market. It's slow or it's fast or whatever the case may be. And the reason I put that in was we would get daily calls on numbers aren't as good as they were last month. And I realized that the moment I put that in, everyone felt better, because if they knew that everyone was having a slow November, then they said, "Oh, okay." And I think
mm,
that's to another interesting point, which is that for whatever reason in this industry, people don't talk. Clinic owners are like little islands. There's very little community other than a Facebook forum where people ask whether clinic owner is the best tool. They're not discussing things about their businesses. They're not sharing. I think there's this belief that they're so competitive with everybody else. I'm in Southampton, that clinic's in Glasgow. I don't want them to know that I'm about to implement whatever technology.
mm,
And so they rarely talk, and they really rarely understand that everyone else is in that position.
mm. And I don't think that's necessarily from a purely competitive point perspective. I think it, in a lot of cases with the people I work with, it comes down from this, again, this dogged belief that I need to do everything by myself, not ask for help, not worry anybody that I'm finding this difficult. There's a phrase I often quote from Brené Brown, a social scientist, and she says, "Do it all, do it perfectly, and don't let anyone see you trying." And that last bit is what kills us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine. It's great. Yes, business is good. We just. My husband laughs sometimes. He occasionally glances at the WhatsApp conversations I'm having with colleagues, and he says, "Oh my God," he said, "you guys are spending your lives putting so much energy into being the nice one on the chat, not saying the wrong thing, not putting on anybody else, not asking for anything else." And I'm sure it's not exclusive to our industry, but we do have this tick that we're supposed to look entirely capable, and woe betide we should ever impose on anybody else that to express the fact that we might need a bit of help and we might be struggling.
And I wonder whether this is a bit of a tangent, but I wonder whether that's why the industry is sometimes quite toxic in some ways, because
Mm,
people absolutely must know best. They know the right way to do things, whether that's in business or whether that's often clinically. Actually, there is no black. It's all black and white. This is right. This is wrong. And I think
mm,
that's quite a lot of toxicity. And beyond that, I find it really interesting that i- i- irrespective of people not communicating very well and clinic owners all having nice support groups, is that there's very little support out there for clinic owners with each other. In many industries, women will band together, BAME groups will band together, um,
mm,
will create support for each other. And this industry is a bit dog eat dog, which is strange given that the majority of people are really lovely people that haven't gone into this to make money. They're not capitalist pigs. They're doing things to help people, but they
Mm.
forget about helping each other. They're more interested in helping the patient often.
Apart from my Mehab Masters WhatsApp group, which has been very active this morning. And yeah, you're right. I mean, in that space, me included, we go on there and we go, God, I really cocked this thing up today. I said this really stupid thing. Oh my God, I've had this experience. Can you help me? And it's quite unusual. You're right. And without exception, obviously, people come in and go, yeah, been there, done that, or yeah, totally see why you're thinking like that. Objectively, look at it this way. But
Yeah.
you're right. We do function like islands, and say again, not from any nastiness. It's just, yeah, we seem to have swallowed this pill that we're supposed to just get on with it, put up with it, and shut up.
I suppose part of that is going back to the very first point I made about as a clinic owner, you can't afford to bring in support staff and organizational staff. So in many businesses, as a business owner, you actually have other people to lean on.
Mm,
Whether that's your finance director, your HR director, your CMO,
mm,
EXO, whatever it might be. In this industry, you have a practice manager, and that's about it. And I do find it really interesting and encouraging that there are quite a few clinics where the practice manager is almost like your other half, who is always
bless
you
them, poor
yeah,
things.
and, they're bounceable, right? It's like they're the person that you rely on, but often they don't have the um I don't want to say no, I don't want to. They're not as experienced in many things as maybe a high-end CMO would be,
Mm,
and so but even so, like, that is really good to have. There are, I don't know, if I had to guess, maybe at best 50% of clinics that have that relationship with the practice manager. The
mm,
rest are doing it on their own, and it's very difficult. Going back to my own experience, and I know you had a business partner and you still have a business partner, but my own experience was that doing it with your other half actually helps massively because you can both understand that you've had a shitty day. You can
mm.
both you understand you've got that shared experience. Who thought I'd ever use the word shared experience? Um, or lived experience. But you have that shared experience, and so you can really understand each other. And often
Yeah.
clinic owners, they do it on their own. Their other half does something completely different, and those people don't understand it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, Matt, if he's listening to this, he won't mind me saying we're not married actually, but our business relationship has been like a marriage in that it's had massively dysfunctional years. And we've had to work through all sorts of stuff. We've had to accept that we are polar opposite personalities, but ultimately we want the same things and we're incredibly loyal, which probably is good recipe for a good marriage if it was a marriage. But you're right. The thing that Matt and I have is that we're the only ones that understand the dance we constantly have to perform between still being clinicians, in Matt's case, still treating a lot of patients, and this other space, which until you've occupied it feels entirely different. I naively thought when I went from clinician to business owner that it would be easy. People would be fine with it. I actually owned the clinic that I had worked in for 5, 10 years by that point. So, these people knew me as a contemporary colleague, friend, and I just thought it'll be fine. Now, in my mind, nothing particularly changed, but I realized almost overnight other people's view of me changed. And there was a whole new space which I didn't actually feel ready to occupy, but I was being asked to. And it's taken a long time to be comfortable in that clinic owner space. And I agree with you. If you're doing that on your own, and if you're lucky, you've got a practice manager who you can shut the door and, go and have a rant or a cry or whatever it is you need, or thresh out more business related ideas, that's a help. But yeah, I'm really glad that I've had Matt along my side because it's it's a really it's a different game you have to play with yourself. There are similarities with being a clinician in that most of us are perfectionists. We want to do a good job, and with our patients, we always want to get it right and be a nice person and get the result. And you want the same as a clinic owner, but your almost your chances of success, and certainly your chances of being liked by everybody, are much, much less as a clinic owner. And that's a huge challenge for the typical personality that goes into a caring profession. Um,
That's a really good point because I think, and this is a bit of a guess on my part, but I think if you took um, created a profile of your average small business owner and then compared it to your average clinic owner, they're very different types of people.
yeah.
Both from an education standpoint, in terms of, I say this all the time. This happened to you, I guess. You're a clinician. You spent all your life being a clinician. You're not exposed to very much of anything business at all. You go into being a business owner, and at no point have you worked in a number of corporates where you learn different things in HR, in finance, and so for me, I start a company. I still don't do it very well, but you start a company, but you at least have a grounding in some of the basics, even things like processes, project management,
Mm,
structure. As a clinician, you know, every one of them goes from being a clinician into being a business owner and thinking that that's all they need, and that is just not true. And
mm,
some of them are very sharp, in terms of understanding that they need extra skills and recognizing that, and they read their books and their podcasts and so on. But many people don't see that because their personalities are so patient focused and
mm,
outcome focused, not business focused. And I think there's often a disconnect that people don't understand. You've heard this a million times. Oh, this isn't about making money. I don't want to make money. It's not. They're almost scared of making money. But where the disconnect comes is they don't realize that actually by making more money, by being more commercial, the patient outcomes will improve. Their lives will
mm.
improve. Physio's lives will improve. And I think that's a really interesting thing that I see people getting wrong all the time.
Yeah, and I know, sorry to preempt you, but I know you wanted to talk about the happiness curve in terms of size of business. And I know that your metrics from your survey have shown that uh, there are kind of two sweet spots with a dip in the middle, of you people reasonably happy when they start out. It's all very exciting, probably working on your own or maybe with just one other person. There's a lot of novelty and you see a lot of success and you start to make some money. And then you go through that middle, your business grows. I think from your survey, that kind of 500K turnover is deemed a middle ground. That's a less happy place for reasons we can talk about. And then if you continue to increase your revenue up beyond the million mark, then according to your survey, happiness improves. And I think a lot of people are stuck in that middle section. And maybe the question is to ask, what does it take or who does it take to move out of that middle section? And I would maybe ask, what is it, if it was a coaching question, what is it you are not prepared to do that will allow you to start heading up that happiness curve again? And for a lot of people in my experience, what they maybe they're not able to articulate it, but what they're not prepared to do is go through accepting some of the things which are non-acceptable for you as a clinician. So are you willing to accept not everybody liking you all the time? Are you willing to accept that your identity is not 100% clinician? That isn't how you introduce yourself at parties anymore. Um, are you able to accept that you have to make some tougher decisions? Um, and I think I would definitely not class myself as a natural person to pass through that gate. And many would argue I haven't. And I think the people that really end up at the top of that curve probably already, personality trait wise, maybe they weren't an ideal clinician. Maybe they are actually better suited to being in that management CEO role.
Yeah, I think so. Just to explain the happiness curve, we're going to release the barometer, the private practice barometer soon, and we've asked so many questions, we've got so many data points, and one of the interesting things that we did was to look at um, how happy people were, and then put that and plot that against the size of their business and where they were in terms of the stages of their business. And what we found was that people are very, very happy at the start, and as they scale and grow, they become incredibly unhappy, and for obvious reasons. And we call it the messy middle. And then
Mm,
you scale up, you become happier again. And the majority of clinics are in that messy middle. They're
Mm,
the ones that are struggling. Very few break out of that. Um, it's very easy to start a physio clinic, right? We all know this. We see it every day. Someone says, "I'm going to start a physio clinic," and whether it's even part time, you want to just do it on the side of your NHS job. But taking it to that next level, that's where it becomes difficult. And yes, I think there is a little bit to what you said there, but um, I think more of it is about the knowledge and the drive, which does go back to personality, but the knowledge that you have to take you to that next level, and sometimes also money, and sometimes risk profile. Um, I was chatting to someone last night at dinner, and uh, there are physios that and clinic owners that really worry about borrowing 100,000, so they get investment and give away bits of their business instead of just borrowing the money. When actually, just borrow the money. It's only £100,000. It seems crazy to some of us that you would even think about giving away anything for £100,000, but it's that risk profile. It's that
mm,
Christ, that's really worrying. Much. This, I guess, part of the reason why people clinic owners tend to move towards that contractor model where you're only paying for the work done. You're not thinking big picture. And actually, this is a really terrible way of running a business. And I'll say it, if you're running a business with contractors in general, it's a terrible way of running your business. You're going to, there are so many extra stresses to that, particularly financially. But I understand why people do it. And I think many people should do it because it's hard to employ people full time. So um, I do think that people are stuck in that messy middle because they don't know how to get out, because they don't have the money to get out. And yes, they don't have the personality to get out. But I don't mean that in a negative way. I think sometimes it's just you have to have a certain drive, which is not necessarily actually a good thing.
mm,
I don't think it makes you a better person because you're willing to um, not see your kids, work 24 hours a day, um, lose all of your friends, have no fun, all of those things. I don't think that makes you good or better as a person. It's just a different type of person. And often
mm,
getting out of it requires some of that. And then beyond that, of course, if you're going to really scale, you need to know how to bring in organizational structure. You need to be able to have the funds to do that, and that for your average clinic owner is just not something they can do.
mm. Or want to if they're honest. And I think it's really worth, that's where good coaching can come in, just asking the right questions to, as you say, challenge the wisdom that bigger is always better and more money will make you happier.
So, let's look at that. We know people at the start are happy, probably, and I don't have the figures in front of me. I should bloody have, but let's say up to £300,000 ish. You're happy. You got one staff member, maybe two, and you're pretty happy. Then you scale, and you've got a vast majority of people in that sort of area where they're unhappy and they're trying to grow, and then you have the people at the top. People at the top will forget about. Um, Given that there's such a vast majority in the middle, my view is, and this is always the advice I give to people, is do you think you can get to the top level? Do you know what that top level actually means in practice? And would you not be happier to get smaller? But I can't tell you how many clinic owners have hired people, and then they say to me, "I wish I was just back where I was 2 or 3 years ago." And then they do that, and they become incredibly
Mm,
happy. They tend also, another interesting thing about the happiness curve is that money follows it too. So you make more money at the start, you make less money in the middle, and then at the end you make the super money. And
mm,
that's another interesting thing, because not only are you more unhappy and you have more stress, you are also much poorer for it because you're trying to pay for things. And I think the average, what do you think the average number, including dividends and so on, what do you think the average clinic owner earns across the country, including London, as a complete average?
um, 45K.
So it's mid 50s, and that's what they pay themselves. But when you think about that, for those people that are in the middle, they're earning £57,000. They have all the stress of recruiting people, employing people, running a business, paying the bills. I mean, it's awful. It's an awful place to be in for many
Mm,
people. And yet they're earning £57,000. They could go and get a job themselves and earn more than £50,000 without all of that stress. And I say that
Mm.
to people a lot. I don't want to, sit here and go, "Oh my God, you should all quit your jobs and become practitioners again." But I think there's definitely a case of think about where you are, and if you want to get to that next level, that's amazing. I think more people should try and have the confidence to do so. But I think there are a large number of people who are in that middle and should just really scale back a little bit and be
There's a slightly different perspective I would add to that, in that you could say to people, okay, you've got at this point in your life, you've got the potential to earn 55K. Would you be happier earning that 55K treating patients? Because to earn that as a clinician, you're going to be working pretty much full time. So that's, a full patient caseload every day. Or do you want to try and earn that? Are you someone that wants variety? So do you want to earn it running a business, which means that sometimes you will be recruiting and interviewing new staff, sometimes you'll be teaching, sometimes you'll be, oh, I don't know, um, redesigning the room decor, whatever. And I say that because I definitely fall into the latter category. Like, if you told me I could earn 55K those two ways at this point in my life, 100% I'd choose option two, accepting that it's still a moderate salary, but I'm working in a way that I choose.
Well, I would agree with you and I do think you're a bit of an outlier with your clinics. I really do, because if that were the case, that um, it was you can earn as a clinician or earn as a clinic owner, and all else being equal, you're happy, whatever, and you just get extra experience and you do a varied number of things, that would be great. But that varied number of things increases your stress levels, it increases the problems. And we know from the survey that there are very few people in that messy middle, if any, who are actually enjoying the varied nature of the role.
Mm.
Brings too much stress for them. So I think in an ideal world, yes, you want the variety, of course. You don't just want to see back pain patients. You want to see, if you're just a practicing physio. But I think it's very difficult to have the variety without all of the stress, without all of that strain and all the problems that come with it, and to remain happy doing so.
Yeah, let's keep batting this ball back and forth. So I would say yes, and oops, definitely from my experience and a lot of the people I coach, um, what you choose doesn't matter, but I think what destroys, overwhelms, and leads people towards burnout more than anything, more than whatever the World Health Organization of burnout will tell you, is a loss of sense of yourself. And when you early on in your clinical career, if you are a classic overgiving clinician, that will start to erode your sense of who you are. You become this person that cares for other people. And for some people, that is enough identity and it is their true identity. But for a lot of us, we start in small increments giving away our knowledge of who we are. And as long as one of the things I love so much about coaching people is helping them remind themselves, who were you before even a clinician? Who went into this profession? Where are they now? Do you still like them? Do you want to find them again? And how do we design your career now to make sure they get a look in?
Mm. I'm smiling because I remember this was bloody years ago, and we were having a chat about something random, and you said we were talking about some of the subject, and you said, you end up being the business owner and the clinician who not only sees the patient, you write up the doctor's notes, and you take them to the bloody consulting appointment, um, uh, and you're not getting paid for that, but you're working so hard, and you feel like you should do these things because you give away too much of yourself, and that in itself is just so problematic. You've got to limit just how much of yourself
Mm,
you give. And since you said that all those years ago, I see it all the time where people
mm.
are going above and beyond. And I think above and beyond is good. It can be good, but within a reasonable structure. You've got to make sure you do put yourself first and your family first. And you
Yeah, or
do.
just keep a sense of yourself. And you can do that inside or outside your job or both. Some people will have so many outside interests that, it's fine. I'll give everything at work because I've got so many hobbies and interests. I know who I am outside work. Other people, so Anna Mazzieri comes to mind. Anna pushes against criticism of workaholism, because she says, I am my work. That's where actually where the chaos in my head subsides when I'm working. That's where I find myself, and both are absolutely fine. But I think the danger is when you have lost who you are. That's when you become really unhappy.
Well, Italians are a different breed as well. Let's
This is true. We all want to be Anna Mazzieri, really.
and I love I should get Anna on the podcast actually. Yeah, no, Anna's great. I think I saw a really interesting podcast with Sam Altman, and something he said really resonated with me. He said he doesn't believe in burnout. He says that you don't burn out when everything is going really well, when you're working with people you love, the business is going fantastically well, numbers are great, and you're enjoying yourself. He said,
Mm,
never been burnt out in that situation. And I thought to myself, absolutely bloody right. Because one day I'm having the time of my life, and the next day a customer complains, and suddenly burnout ensues. And I think there's a lot to that. And if you are not running, if you have a business that is working perfectly, that has really well oiled cogs, you're much less likely to burn out because you really enjoy doing it. And I think that's sort of what Anna was touching on a bit, which is if you love your job and it is part of your identity, and you 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 don't have things that come in and cause you stress, then actually burnout is not a thing you need to be worried
mm,
about too much at all.
mm. There was I don't know if you get James Clear's newsletter. James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits, and he has this great newsletter. He has 3 tips or quotes, and one of them, I won't quote it correctly, but it was along the lines of um, successful people are the ones that can take losses without absorbing the identity of a loser. So it is, accepting it. That's true resilience, isn't it? Accepting that life is full of slings and arrows, and that's normal, and you roll with them, and that doesn't make you a loser. Um, but
I just
to
want
the
just to touch on that. I think that's incredibly important. I was chatting to a clinic owner a week or so ago, and he was very down about all sorts of things. Um, I won't go into details, but he's very down about all sorts of things. And I said, with the money that you're taking out of the business, you're in the top 5% of people in the country. You are in the top 5% of businesses in this industry. Imagine if you're in the top 5% of businesses in any other industry, in finance, in auto.
mm,
You have to be incredibly proud of what you have achieved. It may not be what some other person in another industry who just happened to choose to make cask beers or whatever they're called. Like, yes, they have made themselves £100 million, but that has nothing to do with
it's
anything.
all relative.
It's all relative. You have a really happy family. You see them as much as you like. You can afford things that most people would gawp at, quite honestly. You have a top level business. Yes, there are problems within the business, and yes, you get hit over the head every now and again with some silly problem, but you should be really proud of yourself. And I find in this industry, it's very rare that people are proud of themselves. They always hit
Mm,
themselves over the head too much. And I was on a podcast about a year or so ago, and really nice little podcast. And someone said to me, you are incredible. Look what you have achieved. It is insane. It's amazing. Like, tell us the secret. I was like, luck. I think you can get too wrapped up in praising yourself too much and saying, look at me, I'm brilliant. Look at what I've done. Uh-uh. It's 90% luck. Yeah, there's hard work to it.
mm,
Genius. It's not, if I could do it 10 times out of 10, call me a genius, but no one does. They have a great idea at the right time, meet the right people, all of these things. And by doing that, you realize that when something goes wrong, you can't smack your head over it
mm,
because you don't want to be in a position where you are praising yourself one day and then blaming yourself
yeah.
for everything else. Everything is somewhere in the middle. Chill out. When something goes wrong, it is often not your fault. Um, and you take responsibility too far. It's almost like 7 degrees. It's like this happened, and if I make some tenuous link to myself as a clinic owner, then it was my fault. Come on,
Yeah.
like there's
And
nothing
this from people who are the most generous to other people in their assessment of other people.
exactly. It's like there's nothing you could have done to know that the phone line was going to go down today. Yeah, but if I'd have chosen the right phone provider and I'd have done this and built, shut up, stop it, enough. And again, I do this so much, and I'm really glad that you do what you do, and I think more people should be doing it and helping people, even if I think life coaching sounds a little bit wishy washy. Um, I've changed my mind, as I say, but I do think that there's such a place for that. And our team does it all the time. Even the younger members of the team, a lot of what they say is, "You're okay. Like this is normal.
Yeah.
Yes, you've." A really classic example is this is a constant theme. Our numbers are down. Okay, why? I don't know, but it's terrible. Profitability is nosedive. How many physios do you have? Four. How many are currently working this month? Two. Okay, so where are the others? They're on holiday. So how would you expect the numbers to stay where they are? And they're like, oh Christ, thank God. Yeah, you're right. And when you put these simple things into their heads, they suddenly realize, like, actually, it's not so bad. Okay. And I think that's where business metrics do come in, 'cause
Mm.
they were sort of told a little bit more strongly that look at numbers over a period of time, not just 2 days, then it would make a difference. But I do think that there needs to be a lot more help within this industry for mental health.
Yeah, and
Mm.
it's I know from our first conversation what your view was, however much you tried to hide it about life coaching, and I appreciate that you've changed your mind. But it's often, it's described as, soft stuff and soft skills. Actually, for the type of people that are in our profession, the hardest thing in the world is to do this acceptance and objective thinking about themselves. It's challenging, and in life coaching, you're getting someone to look very squarely at their, what goes on in their head, and challenge them to change it. And you can't just go, "That's stupid thinking, think something different." This is a person who has been programmed either genetically or environmentally, or probably both, for a long period of time. And it takes bravery to for a perfectionist, which I would guess well over 80% of us are, to accept mediocrity a lot of the time, which is normal. That is more challenging than something that other people would consider, incredibly brave. We are people for whom not being perfect is almost the worst thing that could happen. So, this coaching is not soft, lovely stuff. It sounds like nice subjects, but it's a tough call to do the work.
A difference between females and males within the industry as clinic owners, specifically as clinic owners. From the survey, we saw that generally female clinic owners are happier. They tend to earn more money. They run smaller boutique businesses. And if you were to look from the outside, you would want to be them as a business owner. And I don't want to make too many assumptions on it. I do think some of that is down to um, the kinds of people women are compared to men. Maybe there's a bit of testosterone involved there, but I think that just societally and structurally, there's some differences. I was talking to Helen Preston about this, and she was saying, "Well, I would be in a very different place if I didn't have children." And so
Hmm.
I think there's something to be said there. But do you see? Um, I'm interested because I don't know the answer. I can guess. With all the people that you've seen, is there a slant towards women or men, or is it pretty equal? Um, and for the men you have seen, do you find they have the same issues as women, or is there something that's very different?
Yeah, good question. So when I started, I assumed it would be almost exclusively women, and it definitely is very much biased that way. But then
Percentage terms?
I'd say it's about 80-20.
Okay.
Um, but interestingly, the group of men that approach me most, and I would say I have most success with, are quite young male clinicians, sort of late 20s, early 30s. And um, if they are business owners by that point, the issues will be very similar. Um, but often they they are at a point in a career where I would call you're coming down off your first curve. And this is more from a clinician than a clinician owner point of view. You're at that lovely rookie stage where you don't know what you don't know, and everything you learn is a bonus, and more people get better than not. And then, I don't know, probably within the first 5 years of qualifying, that starts to flatten off maybe sooner for some people. Reality kicks in that not everything you were taught at uni works or is true, and not everybody gets better. And I think probably a lot of clinicians in general, but a lot of the men that approach me are just on that downward curve. And, that's, I wonder if you're talking about sort of male and female, and obviously we're going to stereotype, which is unfair, but maybe there's slightly more black and white thinking in the male brain that
I'm thinking more about, um it's not about stereotyping, it's about the kinds of issues and questions that people have. So inherently with women, I think, especially women who have had children, there will be very different types of problems, whether that is spending
mm,
time with the children, whatever it might be. With men, it may be different. So I'm wondering if there is a difference in maybe their attitudes, their thinking, the way that the issues that they're faced with, or is it pretty standard?
um well, Helen's point about having children is probably a good one in that, it would be similar if those young men are fathers. There's a lot of, I'm not spending as much time with my kids as I want to. Um, it doesn't come up when I think about it. That doesn't come up hugely. It's more often than not, it's I'm not good enough. And
Good enough
maybe
for who? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, so I was going to expand on that. So maybe there's a commonality in that often that will be on a clinical basis. I'm not a good enough clinician, not enough at my job, but probably more so with men than with the female clients than men. And that makes me, because I'm so busy, I'm not a good enough wife, friend, mother. Um, Interesting though that you say that the female clinic owners are happier. And the cynical part of me wonders whether women are used to accepting.
No,
Um,
I think
no,
because of where their businesses are on the happiness curve. I don't think it's because they're
you think they're early
women.
curve?
I think that they run more boutique businesses. They tend to have less associates. They're more, let's say, friendly, family-run business, not family-run business, but just a friendlier atmosphere environment. Um, I think that it's to do with where they are on the happiness curve because they, for whatever reason, and I don't, it's obviously not ability, but for whatever reason, they're not, a vast number of them aren't getting themselves into the messy middle. They're staying off before that. And it could be because they do have children. And Helen said, as I say, she said specifically, I didn't get into that at that point because I couldn't, I didn't have the time.
Mm,
So I don't think that there may be an inherent reason that women generally are happy as business owners, but I don't think that's not specifically what I'm talking about. I think it's more that they just don't run businesses that make them unhappy. I mean,
mm,
I don't know the stats right now, but I do wonder if you looked at the top 30 clinics in the country by revenue and profit, let's say, how many of those are owned by women? And I would hazard a guess that it's zero. And again, I don't think it's a little bit like this thing of how many FTSE 250 companies have female CEOs. I think it's about three. Is it because they're not good enough to be female CEOs? Absolutely not. Is it that they're not willing to give up the things that they need to give up to achieve that?
mm,
That's the issue, which I think makes them far more intelligent than the people who are like, I am willing to give up my health, my life, my family, my friends to pursue this one goal, which actually
mm.
doesn't end up making me any happier anyway. So I think it's more intelligent, but I think that's probably
Did did you ask in your survey? Maybe it would be deemed too intrusive, but did you ask whether the clinic owner was a primary breadwinner in the house or not?
I don't believe we did. We wanted to just be. It may be in there, but I don't think so.
Mm,
I think we're going to be doing the survey uh, uh, many more times. So I think having that consolidated data will be really interesting, and that having it continually updated. It's maybe a question we can put in. We had to be really careful about what we asked because we, for all manner of reasons,
mm,
particularly if it could lead to conclusions that maybe were accurate from a data perspective, but not necessarily accurate from an actual perspective of that. Like you can make the statistics of the data say very
Mm,
things. You got to be careful about saying them. For example, you could say women are not as intelligent as men because they don't own big clinics. Now, obviously, that would
yeah.
be much, but yeah. So we just want to be careful about that. But
I wonder with men, and obviously you would need to be a male clinician to answer this question, but I wonder whether they feel a pressure that, I'm in this profession, which is I'm vastly outnumbered, women to men in this profession. Um, and if I'm going to be in it, I've either got to be the best clinician that ever lived, or I've got to absolutely kill it business wise, um, for respect.
I don't know. From the tens of thousands of conversations I've had, the one word that keeps cropping up is competitive.
Mm,
Hear that a lot. I need to be more competitive. I need to be more like that clinic. I want to do better than that person. Um, I I I, I hear that all the time, and I think I don't know if that's the same with women. I don't know, but certainly from the male clinicians I know and have spoken to, it's often about being better than somebody else. And I think maybe
mm,
a bit of male kind of it just happens like
mm,
all areas of life. You need to be the best footballer. You need to be,
yeah. Yeah, which is less of a narrative from females often, isn't
It
it?
is.
It's just,
I don't.
I need to be the best I can.
Yeah, I don't know if there are many females running around and creating their entire self identity around whether their football team is winning football games or not. Well, I
Maybe more so these days.
there are some. I do know there are some, but it's kind of like I can't remember the name of the film, the Colin Firth film where he was an Arsenal fan. I don't think there are many women who are quite like that, where their entire life single team and whether they win or lose is it changes the whole trajectory of.
Mm.
It's always quite amusing. I'm that person, by the way. Uh,
Really?
no, 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 I don't like it when we lose, but yeah, not so bad. So let's sort of finish up with having a little chat around what advice you would give to people. Are there some really simple pointers? If you give maybe 5 pointers to people that would maybe help them, whatever situation they're in.
Okay. Well, some of them I've covered already, but let me think of the things that I end up repeatedly working on, with people. Um, Challenge the voice that keeps coming into your head. Um, First of all, note what it keeps saying to you. There'll be some variation, but for most people, there's a common narrative. And if it's not pleasant or supportive, then start having conversations with it. Ask it when it decided that was true. Could it believe anything different? What would change if it believed something different? And obviously, this inner voice is part of you, but you can sort of separate it and have a conversation. Um, I would, on this idea of comparison and competitiveness, um, what if you were to switch some of that reverence round? And, like you were saying, it took you to be on a podcast to have your own success reflected. We tend to revere clinical gurus, people that we think run better businesses than us. What if you just were to switch that mirror? Um, what I find I end up working on a lot is trying to switch from what I call a process of external validation to some kind of inner self worth. So a lot of us go around the world. This is not just clinicians; this is human beings, looking for basically what other people think of us and what feedback they get. So it's great to get good feedback, and it's a good idea to seek it at work, but a lot of us exclusively our self-worth is exclusively fed by that external process. Can you find ways to start to nurture the little part of you that at some point in your life might have actually thought you were pretty cool, pretty okay, pretty capable? That's an easy thing to say on a podcast. I mean, this is a coaching process that would take a lot of time for a lot of people, but maybe just something to start thinking about. 100%, if you think you might have lost the sense of who you are, then go looking for it through hobbies, pastimes. Stop, if you need to, by spending an hour by yourself It has to be by yourself, doing, first of all, absolutely nothing, which will many people will be the biggest challenge ever. And then something that perhaps you used to enjoy when you were a kid. I've got a client at the moment absolutely loving colouring in um, by herself.
Amazing.
Try to, and then extend that. Who am I really? What do I really think? What do I really want to say, rather than what does always that nice clinician say? Try and find your way home a little bit to an identity that is outside clinician. I think I've done four. What could the last one be? Um, yeah. Particularly if you're still working as a clinician, but also if you're a clinician owner, do less things. Um, a lot of the people that I coach that are still clinicians will tell me that they're overrunning all their appointments by at least 20 minutes, and then they're sending out 4 emails afterwards, because unless they've given every possible nuance to the diagnosis and every useful resource on every clinic appointment, they're failing. No one needs me to tell them this, but it's a useful reminder. Patients will remember about 10% of that stuff. Probably won't do any of it because you've overloaded them. You've overwhelmed yourself. Do less and trust in the fact that a lot happens when you're not with that person. Land something powerful and let it grow between the time you see them and now and when you see them next.
All good. All very good advice. I have one I'd like to add, and I have
Hmm.
your third point about looking back to when you were happy or cool, whatever. Something I have always done. I always think to myself, go back to when you were 16 or 15, choose an age, and if you could tell your 16-year-old self that you were in this position, how cool would you think you'd be? Like, how amazing? How could you ever imagine that you would have got to where you are today? And
Mm,
when you when you frame it like that, you realize that actually you have achieved your dreams and probably some on top. And so what someone else has done, who gives a fuck? Like, this is you have done so well compared to what you ever could have imagined. I think that's
mm.
one. And another one that I live by is always, does it make you happy? It's so simple. It's such a simple question to
Say that one again.
does it make you happy?
Yeah.
It's such a simple question to ask, but people rarely act on it. Is this employee, I don't care how good they are, I don't care how much money they make you, do they make you happier as a business owner? Get rid if not. And this is extend to your personal life. People spend way too long with partners. Everyone's guilty of this. I'm not saying like this, but people spend way too long with partners when they're not happy. If they just ask themselves a little bit more, am I really happy? Does this make me happy? And I think that
Mm.
any problems that you think are big problems can be solved by answering that simple question and getting rid of whatever is making you unhappy. That's always been
There's
a big one for me.
there's lots of physios out there will love a sporting analogy. Quite often I end up quoting, apparently this was a mantra of the, can't remember what year, but the year when British rowers won everything, and certainly the men's eight won everything. Apparently in the years building up to that Olympics, they developed the mantra, does it make the boat go faster? And it was, they're always being approached with new equipment, new kits, new ideas for training, and everything had to go through the filter, does it make the boat go faster? Now, obviously, your version of what makes the boat go faster, you may just be, does it make me happy? But decide first what the boat going faster means to you. And then, as you say, you'll get faced with opportunities and decisions all the time. If you can have a bit of a filter to pass them through, then it helps you separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's important. I always have one which is doesn't move the needle. Because you can spend all this time looking at all sorts of new systems or busying yourself with all sorts of different things. Does it move the needle? Does it improve the business at some point? Because if not, just leave it alone. You're making yourself
Mm,
far too busy. Go have a glass of wine and spend some time with your kids. Um, so yeah, that's another really important one. But listen, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I would
I
love
do.
to get to or let you tell people how to get in touch, where to get resources, what should they do?
Yeah. So I'm only really active on LinkedIn to any great extent. So it's just Joe Turner on LinkedIn. My company is Mehab. Mehab.co.uk is the website, and you can find details on there of how to get in touch with me if you're interested in coaching or any of the courses that I run. Yeah, those are the two main ways.
Perfect. I highly
Um,
recommend it if you're a stressed out business owner like me, um, like I used to be. We didn't touch on one topic actually. We'll cover that another time because I'm sure people will want you back on. So, but again, thank you very much. Get in touch with Joe, and yeah, great podcast.
Thank you, Michael.